So as well as having something useful and worthwhile to say, the words are not enough on their own. We've already talked about body language and all of those sort of things which help with making sure that what we say is worth listening to, that people trust us, believe us, that they want to stay engaged and listening. But another really useful tool are visual aids. That's because actually we don't just take things in by text, by words that we hear. We take stuff in visually as well. So reading, a study suggested we perhaps take 7% in that way. Obviously different people learn in different ways, so this isn't hard and fast rules. 38% of what we take in is by what we hear. How do we hear things? What do we hear about what people are saying? But 55% is down to what we see. And minds are quite good at remembering images on the whole. And so we can often remember stuff better if we've got an image that goes with that. Be that a physical image or a physical artifact, or be that an image painted by words. It's been said, every picture tells a story, an image is worth 1,000 words. So finding the right images can be really helpful, both in terms of communicating information more quickly. So for example, a good diagram is much better at getting across a load of data than us just listing numbers at our audience. Far more likely to be remembered, far more likely to be understood. Some other good points about visual aids before we start thinking about the different types. A visual aid means you don't have to remember everything that you're going to say. You haven't got to remember all those numbers if you've got a good diagram that presents them or an infographic to present them to your audience. Visual aids can allow you to move around the room, so you can perhaps walk around your audience with a visual aid, passing it out, so it can create audience engagement. Though be careful of that you haven't got too much that might distract from what's actually being said and from what you're trying to get across. It can help with maintaining eye contact, telling a good story, sharing an image can help with being quickly there for them to see, and then they're listening to what you say, they're re-engaging with you. Whereas if you've got a whole load of words up on the screen behind you, then they're going to be reading that rather than maintaining eye contact with you. Not a good idea. It's really helpful to show to your audience that you've actually thought about what you're going to be saying in advance. If you've got a useful, relevant image, diagram, artifact, story to share, then that shows that you've thought about it, that you're on comfortable territory, that you know where you're going. And so your audience can feel comfortable in that you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, you're prepared, and you've got something that's useful and worthwhile to share with them. So it shows that you have taken the effort and the care to think about what is relevant and useful to your audience. So those are some of the reasons why we should use visual aids and not just talk at our audience. But what can be a visual aid? Well, perhaps the most obvious form of visual aid that most of us tend to use is a PowerPoint deck, and there are obviously various elements to that PowerPoint deck. Obviously, we could just have text on our slides, but as I've already alluded to, that's not a good idea. Our audience spend too much time reading rather than paying attention to what we're saying. And we certainly shouldn't be just reiterating the words that are on our PowerPoint deck. So what should we have on there? Images, diagrams, short, sharp bullet points at best, at most when it's text. So images, good photographs that relevant, product photos, whatever else it might be. Maybe a short video clip, very short, because you don't want your audience just then, in effect, watching something else and not you're presenting. They won't engage with that in the same way. It could be a good diagram or an infographic to help explain some data in an effective manner that helps get your point across, so makes it relevant to your audience and understandable. So those are just some of the ways that we can use a PowerPoint deck. And with some of that, both with either an artifact or an image, so either something physical or images on our slide deck, they don't always lend themselves to being directly, if we're not selling a product, if we're perhaps selling a service or whatever, they may not be directly applicable. We may not have an image of whatever it is that we do. So think about how it can be a metaphor for what you're doing. So if I was talking about something being like a light coming on, that it was instantly obvious, then I might put a light bulb on there. If I was looking at a new idea, then I might put somebody's brain lighting up. Different metaphor images to just give a visual hook for my audience to hang what I'm saying on. So I like the concept of a visual coat hanger for what I'm saying. I.e. now my audience has got an image in their mind which what I'm saying will align with, and therefore make the whole package, if you like, more memorable as a result. Other things that you might want to think about from a visual aid perspective: websites. So you might have screenshots of websites to explain something. One thing here, don't try and use a website live during a presentation. You can guarantee your computer will play up, the internet connection will drop, all of those things. Never, ever rely on a live internet connection is my advice during a presentation. So if it's a video, I will download it and be running it locally. If it's a website, I will have screenshotted it or screen recorded the process and put that into my presentation. Don't rely on a live internet connection. Keep the use of tech and where things can go wrong to a minimum. But absolutely, screenshots from websites, video, great tool, but don't have too long a video. I don't expect in an 8-minute presentation, if I'm listening to somebody, to find that 7 minutes of it is a video. 20 seconds to 30 seconds of video is the maximum. Otherwise, you're not engaging with your audience, and it's you that the audience has come to listen to. Sound. So you can just perhaps start your presentation with an audio backing. I listened to a great presentation a while ago where somebody was pitching a place to visit, and they started their presentation with the sound of the sea and that sort of relaxing ambient sound. Really helped set the scene to what they were then going to explain. I've also heard somebody talking about an automotive product. It was a racing product, and they started the presentation by having the sound of a car racetrack in the background. Again, really set the emotions going, gave a context to what they were saying. Interaction. So how can you interact with your audience as a visual aid? Ask them a question, get their minds working and thinking about the subject matter. That's a great way to keep your audience on their toes, alert and engaged with subject matter. So make sure you've got relevant questions that you can have interaction with your audience. Sensory involvement. It doesn't just have to be something they see with their eyes. Can they taste it? Can they smell it? Can they hear it? Can they touch it? So we have a set of senses. Can we use all 5 senses in the way that we're engaging with our audience? And I've saved one of the most important ways of engaging with our audience to last: stories. As humans, we respond to stories. We grow up listening to stories. Perhaps we used to have books read to us by our parents. We listened to stories on audio, on ebooks, that sort of thing. We've learnt from stories in our lives. We've shared stories with our families. We've heard family stories. Over generations and generations, we grow up with stories. Stories are part of a heritage of a country, and it's part of what often defines us. And so there's something innate within us that when somebody is sharing a personal story, we respond to that. It helps us build trust and empathy with that person. And so when it comes to a pitch, when it comes to a business presentation, how can you weave in either your personal story, or perhaps a story of a customer you really helped, or somebody, if you're going for an interview, a story from a previous work engagement which really shows how you're an effective employee. Telling a story helps really build relationship with your audience. So one of the most important visual aids, and one of the things I would really encourage you to weave into any presentation that you're going to be doing, is a story. We respond to stories. We love listening round a campfire to a good story, be it a scary story, be it a dramatic story, whatever story it might be. We responded and engineered, if you like, to listen and pass on stories. So make sure you're using that really important tool within your presentation to help encourage your audience to understand it for themselves by putting themselves in your story. Because when we listen to stories, that's what we do. We sort of empathize with the person telling the story, listen to what they went through and relate to that. And so we're now bought into that story. And so using stories as a way of building trust and confidence in you and in what it is that you're pitching is a really powerful way. So let's just recap. We don't just want to be reading text off a screen. We don't just want to be talking at our audience. We want to engage with them. The way we can engage with them is through visual aids. So think about how you can engage all their senses. Think about things they can see, things that you can touch, things that you can engage with their minds through questions. Think about video, websites, images, that metaphor of visual coat hangers to hang what it is that you're saying on there. Think about sound, think about all the senses and how you can engage with them for your audience. And most importantly, think about how you can tell them a good story.